So today's daf yomi is Nedarim Samach Aleph, but we're going to start on the Samach Mabeis, or on the 8 lines from the bottom. We had said in the Mishnah that if a person says, I'm taking a vow not to drink wine hayom, today, that means until nightfall of that day, that he can't drink wine for the rest of the day. But if a person takes a vow not to drink wine for Yom Echad, for one day, then it's for 24 hours. So the Gemara asks the question, he doesn't say hayom, but he says yom. I'm not going to drink wine. Day. Does that mean my dine kehayom or kiyom echad? Is the law like hayom, it means till nightfall, or is it like yom echad, which means for 24 hours? Tashna mi masnisin. So let's try and bring a proof from our Mishnah where it said, if he says, I'm not going to drink wine hayom, it's prohibited until darkfall. Doesn't that imply hayom, that if he would say yom, it would be kiyom echadami, it would be for 24 hours? And we're saying, no, that's not a proof, because ema seifa, the concluding clause says, amar yom echad, that if he says 24 hours, that means asar miyom yom. That means that's 24 hours. Doesn't that imply yom kahayom dami? Doesn't that imply yom is like hayom until nightfall? From the text of our Mishnah, we can't infer either one. So therefore, the Gemara is going to try and bring a proof from the following. Amar Avashi Tashma. We're going to try and bring a proof from the Mishnah that we're going, God willing, going to get to in Samach Gimel, where the Mishnah says Tashma konim yayin shani toim hashana. If a person says it takes a vow that he's not going to drink wine hashana, the year, then we're going to say that's like, by the way, hashana is like hayom. Then we're going to say nisabra, that if under those circumstances, if nisabra hashana, if that year becomes a leap year, they add an extra month, asar ba'u be'ibura, then they're going to say it's prohibited that year and also in the leap month of it. So the Gemara asked the question, hey Chidami, what is the scenario in which our Mishnah is referring to? If you want to say the Mishnah is referring to the following case, Kidikatani, if you want to say it's basically, taking it literally without trying to be medayik too much on the text of the Mishnah, then meaning to say, what does it mean when we say Kidikatani? That he says, if you want to say, he says, Konim Yayim Shani Toim Bashana, that he says, I'm not going to drink wine this year, and that it includes the leap year. Why do we need to say it? It means till the end of the year. I mean, like, I guess today, if you have daylight savings time and you say, I'm not going to drink wine until morning, and then they add an extra hour in the middle of the night. So that's the same question. Of course, it's obvious. Elolav, the Amar, must we be talking about where he says Shana? We didn't say Hashana, he says Shana. And Alma Shana Kashana Dami. He says, even though he says Shana, it's like he said Hashana, and it means that Shana does not mean 1 year from day to day, but it means till the end of the year, and that includes the leap year. That's what it means. So we see from here that Shana is like Hashana, and Yom Dami Kayom Dine. So, and Yom is also like Hayom. So Gemara says, no, that's not what it means. Olam the Amar Hashana. No, this case is really, he's saying Hashana. So if that's the case, what's the Chiddush of the Ibur? So the Chiddush is, so we might have thought we follow the majority of the years. You might have thought the person intended to take upon himself only till the end of what the majority of the years were, meaning the remaining months, and we don't count the leap year. No, we didn't intend to count the leap year. So we haven't answered the question. So Mara moves on to another question. Amar Yayin Shani Toem Yovel. He says, I'm not going to drink wine for the rest of the Jubilee year. So the law of the Jubilee year is that after 7 sabbatical cycles, that's 49 years, the 50th year is called the Yovel, the Jubilee year. The 50th year is called the Jubilee year. So if a person says, I'm not going to drink wine for the Jubilee, do we say what do we look at with respect to the 50th year? Do we look at the 50th year like it is within the previous years within the previous 49 years, or do we look at the 50th year like it was starting first year one of the next year? So how do we look at it when we count what is the Jubilee year itself counted as part of? So Tashma, Gemara says, let's try and bring a proof from the Gemara and from a Brisa, where the Brisa says, Pukta Rabbi Yehuda v'Rabbanan, that there's a Brisa where Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbanan argue, because it says in the pasuk, it says in Bahar, v'kidashtem eshnas hachamishim shana, and you shall sanctify the 50th year. V'kidashtem eshnas hachamishim shana. Shnas hachamishim atamoneh, and the Brisa says you shall sanctify the 50th year. The 50th year atamoneh, v'atamoneh shnas chamishim ve'achas. So what this means, what this Brisa means, is that the 50th year you count, meaning to say it's not counted in that we don't count the 50th year. The 50th year is only counted as part of the previous Jubilee year. And you don't count year 51. So what does that mean? So let's look at the Ran. The Ran will explains it. The Ran says, She'ein shnas chamishim nimnas nimneis le'inyan shmita, that the 50th year is not counted as part of the sabbatical year. Ad te nimnes b'shnas chamishim shel yovel shel avar, unless it is, until it is counted in the 50th year of the previous Jubilee year. So, and it is counted as the first year of the ensuing Jubilee year. So what does that mean? So we see from here that the 50th year is not counted as part of the 50th year goes with the previous cycle and is not counted as part of the first year of the next cycle. So when you go 7 years of sabbatical cycle, you go 7 years, 49, and now you come to year 50. And then after that, then you have another year after that. The Jubilee year, you can't work the land. So is that Jubilee year count as year one of the next sabbatical year cycle? So according to the Rabbanon, it doesn't count as 1 year of the next, as the first year of the next 7 year cycle of the sabbatical. So you go 49, and then you start the next count, even though it's the Jubilee year, it also doubles as year one of the next sabbatical year cycle, which is, by the way, how we rule today. That's what we do. We don't make a break after our sabbatical year cycles. We don't make a break and after 7 of them and say, okay, this year we won't count. We go straight into it. But Rabbi Yehuda says, so Rabbi Yehuda says, that's what Rabbi Yehuda says. Rabbi Yehuda says, Yovel Ol Minyan Shavua. So nowadays we count we go straight. We don't make a break for a Jubilee year. But you see from here that the Rambam Paskins, the Rambam doesn't paskin like that. The Rambam paskins like the Rabbanon. And so therefore, but the Rambam was unsure. The Rambam talks about it, whether or not the Rambam saying which way we should really paskin. But we paskin, practically speaking, like Rabbi Yehuda nowadays. We don't make a break for the Jubilee year. Yeah, Harold has a question.
There is no.
We don't.
No bill is not.
We don't. No, so we don't enforce a Yovel today because the majority of the Jewish people are not living in the land of Israel, and we don't know the tribes, but we would know which year is the Jubilee year. So we could say, well, this year doesn't count for the next sabbatical year cycle. And anyway, we see from here, so that the Jubilee year states, you count the 50th year, but you don't count it as, we don't count 50th year. We don't count it as year 50 and also 1. We don't count it as 1 for the next year. That's what the Rabbanon say. Whereas Rabbi Yehuda says we count it as also Chamishim and also Achas, also as 1 for the next year. So Amar lo Rabbi Yehuda. So the rabbi said to Rabbi Yehuda, Harei Omer Sheishanim Tizra Sadecha. So the Gemara says, according to Rabbi Yehuda, you say that it counts, the Jubilee year counts as year one. Well, that means you're not allowed to work the land in the Jubilee year. So according to you, when it says 6 years you shall work the land, you really, in that cycle, you're only working it 5 years because you're not working the first year. You're only working 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, and then 7 you're not working. So it's a big question on it. So Rabbi Yehuda responds with Devrechem, according to your approach, I have a big question on you too. Aray Omer, it says about you. It says in the verse, it says Va'asat es hatfua shlosh shanim. It says you shall make the crops for 3 years. Haray kan arba, but Hashem says I'm going to give you a bracha that the crops last for 3 years. It's not really just a question on the Rabban. It's a question on how do you read the pasuk. It says Hashem says don't worry about not having enough land in the sabbatical year because you're going to have food for 3 years. But according to this, you should need food for 4 years because there's the sabbatical year and the Jubilee year, and the year after the Jubilee year, and the year before the sabbatical year. So that's 4 years. So we see from here, we're going to say that is, in general, referring to the other cycles of the sabbatical year. Well, Dili Nami, my case also, Rabbi Yehuda would say, all the other years, you're going to work the land for 6 years, but this year you're only going to work it for 5. So that's how the Gemara resolves that question. It doesn't really resolve it. So now we go to the next case. So it says, Ada Pesach Aser. So the Gemara says that if you take a vow and you say, I'm not going to drink wine until Pesach, it's prohibited until the start of Pesach. It should say Adiyei Pesach until the end of Pesach. But let's say Ad Pnei Pesach. There's a dispute between Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yossi. Rabbi Meir says until the start of Pesach, and Rabbi Yossi says you're prohibited if you say Pnei Pesach until the end of Pesach, until the last moment of Pesach. So what's the concept? What's Rabbi Meir's reason that he says until the start of Pesach, whereas Rabbi Yehuda says, whereas Rabbi Yossi says until the end of Pesach? The Gemara says, it must be Rabbi Meir Savar Lomayo Inish L'Sfeika. A person is not going to put himself into a situation of doubt. So therefore, since he's not going to put himself into a situation of doubt, the Ran says, like I explained this on our Mishnah. So we go back to the Mishnah and we see how the Ran explains it there. He says, so hold on 1 second. So he says here, we'll leave that aside. But he says here anyway that Rabbi Meir is saying that since you could interpret this as both ways, you could interpret it as prior to Pesach or as referring to after Pesach until 1 second before Pesach ends. So we're going to say that Rabbi Meir says, a person would not put himself in and say he's going to be obligated by something that he's not sure if it's going to be included within his words. And therefore he says, when he says Lifnei Pesach, he's only prohibiting himself until the beginning of Pesach, because that's certainly going to be included in his words. So we're going to take that assumption that he's going to take the least amount of what he's including in himself, because he wouldn't put himself into a situation of doubt, so he'll take the most certain answer. Whereas Rabbi Yossi Savar, Rabbi Yossi is going to be of the position, Mayo Inish L'Sfeika. Rabbi Yossi is going to be on the position that a person would put himself into doubt, that he would have meant this ambiguous language. And so therefore he's going to be prohibited even on Pesach itself. So hold on, we'll go back to the Ran on our Mishnah where he says, hold on. don't see it right now. Hold on a minute. Okay. Okay, anyway, so that's the dispute, whether or not a person will put themselves in a state of doubt. So the Gemara says, Viramini, and we have a contradiction about this. We have a contradictory source from the Mishnah in Kiddushin, where if a person has Misha, Yesho Shtei Kitei Banos, a person has two groups of daughters. He has two girls who were born to him from wife number one. And wife number one died, and then he has another two girls that are born from wife number two. And then he comes along and he says, Amar, and he accepted the Kiddushin for one of the daughters. Amar Kidashi Espiti Agadola, and he accepted the betrothal for his older daughter. Now it's not clear if he accepted it that way or if he forgot which way he accepted. It's a dispute amongst the Rishonim. But anyway, he accepted the Kiddushin for his daughter, and he says, Ve'eni Odeya, I don't know, in Gedola Shebe Gedolos, if I refer to the Gedola of the Gedolos, the older girl of the first two. When I said older, did I refer to the older girl of the first two, or in Gedola Shebe Ketanos, or the older girl of the two younger ones, in Ketana Shebe Gedolos, or the older girl or the younger girl of the two older groups? When I said the older girl, I wasn't sure which one I had in mind. She Gedola Min Agdola Shebe Ketanos, which is the older one of the older one amongst the younger ones. So we say, therefore, Kuon Asurus, Chutz Min Aktana Shebe Ketanos, Tivir Rebbe Meir. There are mayors going to say that they're all prohibited except for the youngest one of the younger group, which for sure cannot be included in it. And so we see from here that the mayor is saying that a person would put himself into a doubt, and we would take the possibility that he included himself in this doubtful situation. Whereas Rabbi Yossi says, Kuan Mutarot, Rabbi Yossi says a person wouldn't put himself into a doubt, and so therefore they're all going to be permitted except for the oldest one of the oldest group. So we see from here, they're saying the opposite of what they said here, because in our case, in Nedarim, we're saying when Meir says we wouldn't put yourself into a doubt, and whereas in the Gemara and Kiddushin, he says you would. Whereas in Rabbi Yossi says here a person will put themselves into doubt, whereas in the Mishnah and Kiddushin, he says he wouldn't. So Amarav Chanina bar Avdimi Amarav Muchlefes Hashita is a very powerful idea. He says that we have to switch the positions here. The Mishnah here got it wrong. We have to reverse it. We follow the Mishnah that Rabbi Meir says that you're prohibited until 1 second before Pesach ends. Rabbi Yossi says that it's prohibited just until Pesach starts. So we see from here the Gemara has this concept that they had the sugya all wrong, that they had a faulty transmission, and Muchlefes Hashita, we have to reverse the positions. Well, yes,
it makes sense because Rabbi Meir's Chayish Miyuta.
It makes sense to say Rabbi Meir has to be concerned about the Dow. He's saying because Rabbi Meir is in general throughout Shas is Chayish Miyuta, that he's concerned about any possibility. So therefore, it makes more sense. A very good Hayara always saying the Chiddush. We have to say that this is Rabbi Meir who says that a person will put themselves in a doubt, because Rabbi Meir is always throughout Shas is concerned about any possibility that could arise. He's concerned even for a small possibility. That's why when a person wants to give tzedakah, if you want to hope for a miracle, you give tzedakah to the charity of Rameir Balanese, because Rameir is always believes in the possibility of a little bit of a miracle could happen. Okay, because he's Choshesh L'Miyuta, so that's a Chiddush of Roi, very nice. So, and the Gemara says, we'll have a brisa that supports us. Vatanya Zakal. We have a brisa that supports us. Vatanya, and we look here. It says here in the Rashi, not the Rashi, in the Mefarish, it says B'nichusa. The Vatanya here is coming to support. It's B'nichusa. It's coming to support. Zakal Kol Shezmano Kavua. Anytime you have a fixed time period, the Amar Ad Kanei, and you say until before, Rameir Omer Achi Yetze, it goes until the last possible moment. As Rabbi Yossi says, Achi Yagir. Rabbi Yossi says until that time, until the time arrives in the first place. So now we're up to the next Mishnah. Ada Katzir. If a person says, until the harvest. It usually refers to the wheat harvest. Or if the person says Ada Batzir, which is usually the grape harvest, Ada Masik, this is the olive harvest. Even if he says Ein Us or El Achiaki, in all these cases, it's only prohibited until that time actually arrives. They are Kol Shazmano Kavua Amar Ad Sheagia, Asar Ad Sheagia. So any time which is a fixed time and it says until that time comes, it's prohibited until that time actually arrives. Amar Ad Sheyehei says Ad Sheyehei, then it's going to be Asar Ad Sheyetze. Then it's prohibited until the end of that time. The Kol She'ein Zmano Kavua, but any time where there is no fixed time, Bein Amar Ad Sheyehei, Bein Amar Ad Sheagia, Eino Asar Ad Sheagia. But any time where there is no fixed time, whether he says Ad Sheagia, whether he says Ad Sheyehei, then it's only prohibited until that actual time arrives. And we'll see what that's referring to in the Gemara. The Gemara is going to talk about that situation. Let's say he says Ada Kayetz. Let's say he says until the Kayetz, which we know we're going to learn from the Gemara. The Gemara is going to explain is the reference until the gathering of the figs, which is not a specific time. Then, or Achiyeheya Kayetz, or until the beginning of the Kayetz, the beginning of that. What does that mean? That only refers to the time where the people start to put their figs in the baskets. If he says Achiyavora Kayetz, if he says until the Kayetz ends, it means Achiyakbilu Amiktos. It means until the time where they fold up their fig knives and they put it away. You used to have special grapes you harvest by hand, but the figs, you need a fig knife to harvest it. Tana, Kakala Sha'amu, Kakala Shaltain, Will Kakala Sha'anakim. They'd say until the time where they bring in the baskets, that's the fig baskets, that's the kites, but not the baskets of the grapes. The grapes baskets is not included. Tanya, I know there may be Paris kites. And so let's say somebody says, I'm taking a vow against the fruit of the kites. He's only prohibited in the ta'anim. The kites refers to the collection of the figs. He says, no, it also includes grapes. My taima, the Tanakama. Why does the Tanakama say it only refers to ta'anim? Because Savar ta'anim miktatsam biyada. He says the figs, you cut them down with your hand, and so therefore they're called kayets. Whereas another one, whereas the grapes, you harvest them with a knife, is the opposite of what I said before. The grapes, you harvest it with a knife, and therefore it's not called katzitza, but it's called chaticha. And so therefore it's not going to be included within the expression of kayets. That's the explanation for the Tanakama. He says, no, the grapes also, but when they dry up, you can harvest them by hand, and that's also called kayets. Okay, we'll stop here. We'll stop here today. Everybody should have tomorrow. The daf will be at